By the morning of February 3rd, 2023, the temperature outside Dante Harris's shipping container on Detroit's east side was 9 degrees below zero. The wind chill coming off the abandoned warehouses along Mount Elliott Street was 27 degrees below zero. Inside the container, a $4 thermometer from Dollar General, taped to an insulated steel wall, read 54 degrees Fahrenheit. It was a 63-degree differential, maintained through one of the coldest nights in Detroit's recent winter history, with no heat source except 4 tea candles and a man's own body. 3 miles away, Detroit's largest emergency warming network was at 112% capacity. People were being turned away at the door. Dante had built his container home from a damaged unit that a River Rouge shipping yard was paying to store. Rigid foam pulled from a construction dumpster on Gratiot Avenue, moving blankets from a U-Haul trash pile, a cracked terracotta pot from a garden supply store, and a salvaged solar panel he bought for $8 at a Detroit scrap yard. His total cash outlay was $249. Neighbors had laughed at him while he was building it. They called it a metal coffin. By the end of that winter, nobody was laughing. This is exactly how he did it. To understand how a man built a functioning, winter-ready home for $250, you first have to understand who Dante Harris was before he was unhoused. He was an engineer who lost his job. For 11 years, Dante worked as a residential HVAC technician in the Detroit metro area. He installed furnaces, diagnosed ductwork, and spent thousands of hours inside the walls of Michigan houses, learning exactly where heat goes and why. In 2018, his contracting company lost its biggest account and laid off 7 technicians. A divorce the same year took most of his savings. By 2020, he was living in his truck. By 2021, the truck was gone too, but his HVAC tool bag was not. A canvas bag with a voltmeter, tin snips, a tape measure, a utility knife, and a caulk gun. That bag and the 11 years of knowledge inside his head were the 2 things he refused to lose. They would turn out to be the only things he needed. By early 2022, Dante had been sleeping in abandoned buildings along Detroit's East Industrial Corridor for 8 months. He was 47 years old. He had no intention of dying in an abandoned building. That's when he started walking past the River Rouge container yard. The yard sat on Jefferson Avenue, a sprawling lot filled with stacked shipping containers in various states of disrepair. Dante walked past it twice a week on his way to a food pantry. He noticed one container in particular, a 20-foot unit near the back of the lot, painted faded red, with an obvious crease down one wall and a dent in the corner post where something heavy had hit it in transit. That container had been sitting in the exact same spot for 8 months. Dante knew this because he had been watching. To someone who has never worked in logistics, a damaged shipping container looks like garbage. To someone who has worked in logistics, it looks like a problem. A damaged container cannot be rented for commercial shipping. The structural crease makes it ineligible for stacking. The corner post dent makes it impossible to secure to a chassis. It sits, and while it sits, the yard owner pays property taxes and insurance on a unit that generates 0 revenue. Dante walked into the yard office one Tuesday morning in April 2022. He told the owner, a man named Sal, that he would haul the damaged container off the lot for free, no payment required. Sal said yes within 60 seconds. That conversation was the single most important moment of the entire build. Dante understood, walking in, that the yard owner wanted the container gone more than Dante wanted to have it. He had leverage and he used it politely, and he walked out with a steel structure that retailed for over $2,000. The haul itself cost $180. A man with a flatbed truck who Dante had done a favor for years earlier agreed to move the container to a vacant lot on Mount Elliott Street. That $180 was 72% of Dante's entire budget, but it was non-negotiable. The lot was the second masterpiece of the project, and Dante had chosen it weeks before the container ever moved. It was an abandoned commercial parking lot on Mount Elliott Street, east of downtown Detroit. The owner was a defunct LLC that had dissolved in 2019. The property was in tax foreclosure limbo, which in Detroit can last for years. But the real reason Dante picked that lot had nothing to do with ownership. It had to do with three physical features. The entire lot was paved with old commercial-grade concrete, flat and structurally sound, which meant no foundation work. A rusted chain-link fence along the street obscured the container from casual view, and a massive abandoned warehouse stood on the adjacent lot, its south wall running the full length of the property, acting as a 40-foot-tall windbreak against the northwest air coming down off Lake Huron. Every decision was deliberate, every decision was physics, and the container had not even arrived yet. When the flatbed dropped the container onto the lot on a Thursday in late April 2022, Dante had $69 left in his pocket and a list of materials in his head. A steel shipping container, unmodified, is a thermal disaster. Steel conducts heat in and out with brutal efficiency. In Detroit winter, the interior will be within 3 or 4 degrees of the outside air. Sleeping in a bare container in January is functionally identical to sleeping in a parking lot. So insulation came first. The construction dumpster on Gratiot Avenue had been feeding Dante scraps for 3 weeks. A commercial crew was renovating a former bank branch into office space, and every afternoon they threw out the offcuts from their rigid foam insulation panels. Long, jagged strips, sometimes 2 feet wide and 4 feet long, perfectly usable by anyone willing to puzzle them together. Dante pulled roughly 200 square feet out of that dumpster over 3 weeks. He cut them to fit between the container's internal structural ribs using a utility knife and a tape measure. He glued each piece in place with construction adhesive, pressing firmly against the steel and holding it until the tack grabbed. This part of the build took 4 days, but the foam alone was not enough. And this is the moment where Dante's HVAC background made the entire project work. Every shipping container has vertical steel ribs running from floor to ceiling along both long walls. These ribs are structural. They give the container its strength. They are also thermal bridges. Uninterrupted steel pathways conduct cold directly from the outside to the inside, no matter how much insulation you pack between them. Most people who convert shipping containers do not understand this. They fill the spaces between the ribs, admire their work, and then wonder in January why their container is still freezing. The answer is that the ribs themselves are still carrying cold through the wall. The insulation between them is irrelevant. The bridge is the problem. Dante knew this from his first year in HVAC school. So after the foam was glued in place, he did something most container builders never think of. He pulled moving blankets out of a U-Haul dumpster 3 blocks away, roughly a dozen of them, thick quilted fabric in faded colors, and he hung them across the inside of the container, covering the ribs completely so that no steel surface was exposed to the interior air. That second layer, draped across the thermal bridges, was the single most important construction decision of the entire build. It is the reason the container held 54 degrees Fahrenheit on a night that was -9 degrees Fahrenheit. Without it, Dante would have been sleeping at 15 degrees maximum. He sealed every seam with 4mm polyethylene sheeting and duct tape from his own tool bag. The polyethylene cost $22 at a hardware store in Hamtramck. The floor got the same treatment. Foam offcuts across the metal, moving blankets over the foam, plywood from a demolition site in Highland Park as a walking surface. The ceiling got moving blankets stapled directly to the interior, covered with polyethylene. By the end of the second week, the interior looked like a quilted cocoon. Every metal surface was covered, every seam was sealed, but a sealed box with a person in it will suffocate that person within hours. Dante needed two more things: a way to add heat and a way to exchange air without losing it. The heat source cost $0. Dante found a cracked terracotta pot, roughly 10 inches in diameter, behind a garden supply store on Van Dyke Avenue that was throwing out damaged inventory. He took the pot, flipped it upside down, and set it on a scrap metal stand he welded from rebar pieces. Underneath the inverted pot, he placed 4 tea candles on a ceramic tile. That is the entire heater. The physics is ancient. The candles produce heat. The terracotta absorbs it into its thick clay walls. Clay has enormous thermal mass. It stores heat and releases it slowly. Within 20 minutes of lighting the candles, the outer surface of the pot is radiating warmth at approximately 200 degrees Fahrenheit, spreading gentle infrared heat across the insulated space. 4 tea candles burn for roughly 4 hours. A second set takes him through the night. The Romans used terracotta tile systems called hypocausts to heat bathhouses 2,000 years ago. The concept of radiant thermal mass is in every introductory heating textbook. It has simply been forgotten by most of the modern world. But a combustion heater in a sealed space creates a new problem. Carbon dioxide builds up, and moisture condenses on cold steel and eventually rusts the structure. So Dante cut 2 vents. The vents were 4-inch holes cut through the container wall with a hole saw he borrowed from an auto body shop owner who knew him by sight. One vent was placed high, near the ceiling, on the east wall. The second was placed low, near the floor, on the opposite west wall. He covered both with scrap-a-screen door mesh. This is a passive convection loop. Warm air, which rises, exits through the high vent. That exit creates a slight pressure drop inside the container, which pulls fresh air in through the low vent. The air exchange happens continuously and silently, driven entirely by the temperature difference between inside and outside. Vent sizing is a real engineering problem. Too small and the air stagnates. Too large and the warm air races out so fast the heater cannot keep up. Dante sized those vents in about 90 seconds of mental math. He knew the cubic footage of the container. He knew the rough BTU output of the terracotta heater. He calculated the vent area from the air exchange rate he needed, which was roughly half a cubic foot per minute per person for carbon dioxide management, and he built exactly what was needed because vent sizing was his actual job for 11 years. The result was that the interior never dropped below 45 degrees even on the coldest nights of February 2023, and the air quality inside stayed clean enough that he woke up every morning with a clear head. With shelter, heat, and air handled, Dante turned to electricity. His power needs were minimal: light after dark so he could read and plan, a phone charge so he could apply for jobs and stay in contact with his daughter. He did not need to run appliances. That constraint let him avoid the mistake that wrecks most off-grid builds. The mistake is trying to replicate grid power, buying expensive inverters to convert 12-volt direct current battery power up to 120-volt alternating current household power, losing roughly 15% of the electricity in the conversion. Dante refused to play that game. He kept everything 12-volt direct current from end to end. The solar panel was a 50-watt rigid unit pulled from a scrapped recreational vehicle at a Detroit auto recycler on 8 Mile Road. The owner sold it to him for $8. It was paired with a used car battery from the same yard for $7. The charge controller, which regulates power flow from the panel into the battery, was pulled for free from an electronics recycling bin at a Midtown recycling center. Dante wired everything using copper salvaged from an abandoned electrical junction box. He ran a single positive and negative line from the battery to a 12-volt cigarette lighter style outlet LED strip lights, donated by a church on Woodward Avenue, plugged directly into the outlet, producing bright, warm light at roughly 12 watts. USB car adapter in the same outlet handled phone charging. Total power system cost was $15. Total power system capability was enough to run his life. The final system was water, and water is where Dante made his most strategic decision. He accepted a constraint instead of fighting it. Plumbing is what kills most off-grid container builds. People try to run pressurized water lines, install tanks, route drains, and connect toilets. Every one of those systems requires money, permits, and ongoing maintenance. In a non-permitted shelter on an abandoned lot, everyone is a liability waiting to happen. Dante decided he would not solve plumbing with pipes. He would solve it with buckets and gravity. The container's flat steel roof caught rain and snowmelt efficiently. Dante welded a simple gutter from scrap aluminum, flashing along the low edge of the roof, sloping down toward a corner where a downspout dropped the water into a 55-gallon food-grade plastic drum from a Detroit bakery. One drum held roughly 3 weeks of wash water. A spigot at the bottom fed the water by gravity into a plastic basin for washing his hands, his face, and his dishes. For drinking water, Dante walked to a gas station on Gratiot once a week and bought a single gallon for $4. That $4 was his only ongoing utility cost. For sanitation, he built a composting toilet. He used a 5-gallon plastic bucket lined with a trash bag, a toilet seat from a Habitat for Humanity restore that cost $3, and a bag of sawdust from a wood shop on the east side. After each use, he added a handful of sawdust, which absorbs moisture and eliminates odor through aerobic decomposition. Once a week, he sealed the bag and carried it to a community garden 4 blocks away that accepted compost donations. Every water decision was a refusal to fight something he could not win. By November 2022, the container was finished. 7 months of scavenging, cutting, gluing, wiring, and sealing. Total cash spent, $249. Total living space, 160 square feet. And then came February. The first week of February 2023 brought an Arctic air mass down across the Great Lakes. On February 3rd, Detroit recorded an official low of 9 degrees below zero, with a sustained wind chill of 27 degrees below zero. The city's emergency warming network opened every center they had and still hit 112% capacity by 8 in the evening. People were sleeping on gymnasium floors. Some were being turned away and sent to other overflowing facilities. Dante woke at 5 o'clock in the morning on the 4th. The thermometer inside his container read 54 degrees. He had gone to sleep at midnight with 4 tea candles burning. He woke up warm. He stepped outside to use the composting toilet and watched his breath crystallize in front of his face. When he stepped back inside, the first thing he noticed was not the warmth. It was the silence. The container was dead quiet because the vents were pulling in frozen outside air so slowly, so patiently that there was no noise. The system was running exactly as he had designed it. A 63-degree temperature differential was maintained overnight by 4 tea candles, a terracotta pot, and 1 man's body heat. 3 miles away, people were being turned away from shelters funded with millions of dollars of public money. The second payoff came a month later. In early March 2023, a Detroit code enforcement officer named Janet Mills received an anonymous complaint about an unpermitted structure on Mount Elliott Street. She pulled the property record, confirmed the lot was in tax foreclosure with no active owner, and drove out to issue a removal notice. She expected to find a collapsing pile of plywood and tarps. Instead, she found a clean, straight shipping container with a functioning vent system and a man sitting outside it reading a library book about passive solar design. She asked if she could look inside. Janet walked in and immediately asked Dante about the insulation in the way a person asks when they genuinely want to know. Dante explained the foam between the ribs, the moving blankets across the ribs, the polyethylene vapor barrier, and the reason each layer existed. Janet asked about the heat source. Dante showed her the terracotta pot and explained thermal mass. Janet asked about ventilation, and Dante explained the convection loop and his vent sizing math. Janet had worked for the city for 14 years. She had never seen an unpermitted structure engineered correctly. She had certainly never seen one engineered by the person living in it, out loud in real HVAC terms, on the spot. When she walked back out to her city vehicle, she did not file the removal paperwork. According to Dante, she said she had come here to tear this down. She said she was going to go back to her office and try to figure out how not to tear it down. Janet did not file a report for 6 months. Dante got 6 more months on the lot because a city inspector respected craftsmanship more than she respected the form on her clipboard. The third payoff came from the last person Dante expected. A man named Raymond had been living in an abandoned gas station 2 lots down from Dante's container for most of 2022. Raymond was loud. He was funny. Raymond had been mocking Dante's container build from the day the flatbed dropped it. He called it a metal coffin. He called it Dante's oven. He told anyone who would listen that Dante was going to freeze to death in a sealed steel box the first time it got cold. On the morning of February 5th, 2023, 2 days after the polar vortex peak, Raymond walked across the lots and knocked on Dante's door. He was wearing 3 jackets and shaking. His gas station had been 11 degrees inside during the cold snap. He had spent the night walking in circles to stay alive. He looked at Dante and asked one question: "Can you help me build one?" By the summer of 2023, there were 3 containers on the Mount Elliott lot. Dante had helped Raymond build his, and together they had helped another man named Curtis build a third. By the winter of 2023, there were 5. It became an unofficial, unregistered village of engineered shelters built by people the city had written off. None of those 5 containers have been removed. The lot remains in tax foreclosure limbo. The 5 residents pay no rent and draw no attention. They watch out for each other. They share tools. And every cold snap, while the official warming shelters 3 miles away hit capacity and turn people away, the 5 containers on Mount Elliott Street remain warm, quiet, and stable. What Dante Harris built was not a shipping container home. What he built was a demonstration that every livable space on Earth is a collection of 4 systems: thermal control, air exchange, power, and water. If you understand the physics of those 4 systems, you can solve all of them with materials other people throw away. The deeper lesson is about constraints. Dante could not fight the plumbing problem, so he designed around it, accepting manual water and a composting toilet in exchange for freedom from pipes. That acceptance was not weakness. It was the core engineering insight of the entire project. The constraint you cannot fight is the constraint you design around. Most of the world has been trained to believe that expertise comes from credentials and solutions come from spending. Dante had neither. He had $249, a canvas tool bag, 11 years of HVAC knowledge, and the patience to walk past a container yard twice a week for 8 months until he understood that the yard owner wanted the damaged unit gone more than he wanted to keep it. Dante Harris is still living on Mount Elliott Street. The container has held up through 2 Detroit winters. Raymond lives next door. Curtis is 3 containers down. The lot has no address, no mailbox, and no utility bills. It also has no vacancies. This channel exists for stories like Dante's. For the builders the world writes off, the methods that get called primitive right up until the moment they outperform the official answer, and the quiet intelligence that never shows up on a resume but saves lives when the temperature drops. Subscribe, because the next one is about a woman in Phoenix who cooled a shed to 68 degrees in 115-degree heat with nothing but water, dirt, and a single length of copper pipe. See you there.